David Singer. I'm a school board member in for the Harrison Central School District in Harrison, New York. It's about a half hour north of here. I've been on the school board for 10 years. 3 of those years I've been board president, 2 vice president, and I was proud when I first joined the board about 10 years ago to be able to be on the board that appointed Louis Wohl as our superintendent. Lou has been working in education for over 32 years, 18 years as in urban education, 16 years as a teacher, and as I said, the last 10 years as a superintendent of schools, and then also proud to say that last year the New York State Council of School Superintendents named Lou the New York State School Superintendent of the Year. And we'll get into a little bit as to
I didn't get a raise as a result of that. I want to make that clear.
No, actually, his salary's been frozen for 2 years for other reasons, but that's a whole nother conference. But it was interesting just to follow what Jeff said and what Jack just presented to you. We have no slides, we have no paper airplanes, we have no lab experiments. But what we do have is possibly, as being the beginning of this conference, a framework for these sessions. It's clear by looking what we just saw and also the schedule for the next 2 days, there's tremendous innovation going on in the cracks and crevices of schools throughout the country, whether they be private, public, parochial, and even digital. But I have a question for you, and then we'll get into a conversation on this. Is if your goal or the goal of this conference is to try to solve complex, value-based problems with tools and technologies, I'm afraid that in a larger context, it's going to fail. And our society tends to always try and look for quick fixes and instant gratifications, and technology is an easy one to grab onto. But without a systemic and holistic approach to dealing with education, reforming education, these innovative tools and techniques and concepts, whether they be incubated in charter schools, will at best serve some isolated population on some marginal level, what I would sort of define as the artisan model. Pockets of innovation remain just that, they're in pockets. Systemic change and improvement requires, we believe, strong, unwavering leadership, commitment, and sustainability. Community engagement, but not necessarily unanimous community engagement. School systems today in the U.S. are designed to, I believe, to serve a society that no longer exists. We persist today in having schools that continue to track, select, and sort kids by their ability to perform on tests within the strictures of school, and not really paying attention to the opportunity that we need to give all kids at all ability levels. I just want to defer to Lou here a little bit for his take on the overview.
Welcome to my living room. This is really weird. How many of you were in the high reading group? Anybody? Okay, the rest of you are failures. I just want to make that clear. I warned David that I didn't really want to come to this conference because I wasn't sure that we had anything of value to add, but I think the value add that we might provide is how can we take people like you who are innovative and help you to be more successful. My experience as a public educator, I was a first adopter at lots of things, and what I found was that the system really didn't support first adopters. This is not a typical audience for me because I usually talk to people that are risk averse. And public school is typically so. So here's a very quick story of what school systems do to kids all the time, and we would think that changing that, whether it's using technology or using varied philosophies about how to engage kids in learning. Algebra for all. It's a pretty well-known topic. We have a middle school. We're a suburban district of about 3,600 kids. We have lots of money, but we're a little more diverse than most places. We had about 26 kids in a class of 260 who took algebra in the 8th grade. 100% of the 26 kids scored mastery on the New York State test. Hooray for us. So when we detract mathematics, we now have 260 of 260 kids taking mathematics and over 240 kids scoring at the mastery level because the kids got really smart. Now, the first adopters in the room would say, that's great news, your innovation worked, and everybody's going to get on board and go along for the ride. Well, in the year that I became the superintendent of the year in New York State and got, all these pats on the back, there was a new wave of ferocious attacks saying we need to go back to sorting and selecting kids and finding ways to limit opportunity. So while I'm excited about you being here and I'm excited about the idea that technology can in fact serve a way to leverage more opportunity, to create the conditions where kids can engage in generative learning, where kids can use all parts of themselves to be actualized, my story as a public educator for 32 years is that most people don't really want to invest in making sure that all kids have an opportunity. So all of your great ideas are going to be limited by whether or not you're willing to accept the challenge that goes along with being a first adopter. And that is the ferocious feedback and pushback you're going to get when you ask people to reconsider all of those deeply held stereotypical ideas about people, about kids, about learning and opportunity. So the reason I came here, other than David gets to decide whether my contract gets renewed and how much money I make, is because I think we have a responsibility as public educators to think about how we make you more of a partner in leadership. Our great challenge is, so we have a community with great wealth. We have a community that's succeeding in ways that it's never succeeded before, and it still doesn't fully support what we do. We open doors for advanced placement opportunity. We had a 500% increase in the number of kids scoring 3, 4s, and 5s, and there are people in my community who are still saying, somehow you must be disenfranchising the top by putting those kids in those classrooms.
If I can just interject from my standpoint on the school board, I've run in 4 elections for school board. First time I was unopposed. The second time I ran because, and I was opposed by a former high school teacher and also a resident of the town who ran because Lou had decided that we had an alternative program for kids who were not necessarily special ed or had IEPs, but they had social issues, and they were put into an alternative high school setting that really was nothing more than a dumping ground. None of these kids ever came out with a Regents diploma. Lou thought it was wise to mainstream these kids, and as a result, I got my first opponent for the school board. The second time I ran for the school board, my opponent's main plank was that we should offer any job openings in the school district, we should offer to Harrison residents first, and if that pool of candidates doesn't fulfill the slot, then we can go outside and look for the best candidate. And then this past year, I ran again, and we had a slate of candidates who were comprised of Wall Street lawyers and investment bankers who were doing just what Lou had alluded to, literally 6 months after Lou gets Superintendent of the Year award, they want to oust him and get rid of me from the school board because we have detracked and we're now forcing their kids to be in the same class with those kids.
But my wife loves me. So all of you, research matters, right? To us it matters. We all look at it. We all know. You're all very excited about the ways in which you can use technology to get kids to be more constructivist in their approach to learning. We take all those ideas and we try to create the conditions that will allow those important things we discover to make a difference. But here's the ugly truth. Research doesn't matter unless you are willing to get ready to lead in a way that's going to support that research. People do not embrace change. I don't know how to... Now, let's think about all the technology that you've embraced. So in 1981, I was a first adopter. I had a Tandy lab. I don't know if Tandy exists anymore. So the server was in my room, and it was really cool, and it really didn't change much because nobody supported my professional development. If you roll back to when I was a kid, I was born in 1955, so I'm revealing my age. Do you remember the open classroom movement? They took the walls away. was an abject failure, right? Actually, it wasn't. It was a huge success, and we found that out 5 years after we eliminated it, but the kind of leadership necessary to support the change wasn't there. And that's primarily because we don't understand what it takes to reform. So I get really excited when I hear a young principal like Chris talk about the innovative things he's doing in his charter school. I also get really frightened.
Nope, not a charter school.
Public charter school.
Nope, just public school.
Public school. 100 kids. I was in an urban district that used a magnet school, charter school system to do what? What do you think? Sort and select. Sort and select. What goes on in public schools now is another way of defunding public school. We have become our own worst enemy. I don't believe that public schools are failing. I believe that research matters. I would think that results would matter. I can tell you that by and large that's not the case. It's not the case. We're in a system that we have resources. When I was in an urban district, I didn't have money. So I have the professional development money now. I have the advantageous class sizes. We've proven the case that certain kids can be engaged when they're given the opportunity and the resources. It hasn't changed the hearts and minds of many. So I guess my purpose in being here for you today, to share with you some of the things that I think are important for you to know, is that if you do not get ready and understand that if you do these things in isolation of the bigger idea of how do you really support the change, that it's likely just to be another open doors initiative.
What? Is that? Wow.
I usually don't get music, I usually get rocks, but I'll take music.
Really?
David?
Wow, that was 15 minutes. I just want to make one last point that Lou had impressed upon me and being on the school board. One of the first things he did was he took a professional development budget that when I joined the board it was about $25,000, and we've grown it to today where it's over $350,000, and it's geared and it's a very powerful tool to basically reclassify the whole prestige level of the teaching profession, something similar to what Finland does, just as a matter of right. Anyway, in this very brief period of time, I want to thank you and thank Jeff and Chris for hosting this. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you. My pleasure.